Rise and fall of Valyria. Under Mayavar rule and with the help of the dragons, the Valyrian who now had power gone to their heads started attacking nearby areas. This expansion would go on that would be considered one of the largest expansion of all time. Inevitably, this expansion of Valyrian freehold comes into conflict with the Giscari Empire, which was very superpower that dominated the continent for long time even before the Long Night. They fought each other for power and dominance. This would go on to be a series of 5 great wars, ending with the Valyrians throwing down the Giscari in defeat multiple times. But again Giscari were not one to give up, and due to the constant uprisings happening because of the Valyrian being frustrated and decided to make an example of Giscari. Aragon watched from a distance as the Valyrians pulled down the city's walls. The Valyrian dragons unleashing their flames, and another one flies overhead, still blowing flames in a line all the way across the Giscari city. Gandalf saw people scream and fall and die in the inferno. He was a person who tried to saw good in people, but Giscari were not redeemed able in the slightest. Gandalf walked next to Aragon and whispered, "Let's go, my king, we have done what we could. The slaves have already been taken away, we rescued RHE ones we could." Aragon nodded and replied, "Yes, but it is pity so much death and destruction." Gandalf nodded and muttered, "To think our dragons come from same place these monsters is unbelievable. But I guess even ours have their faults." Aragon could understand what Gandalf meant. Middle-earth dragons were intelligent and wise, but they do have their faults, arrogance and anger like any sentient beings. Aragon, breaking out his thoughts, said, "The Valyrian dragons had their intelligence restricted with blood magic, while ours had their intelligence enhanced with the blessing. So both are different from each other. But the end of the day how the dragon is used will depend on the rider." Aragon turned, walked off as a portal opened up and they walked into it, disappearing into the night. The Valyrians burned the buildings to ashes and cinders and poisoned the surrounding lands with salt, sulfur, and skulls to prevent it from rising again. Old Guise was burned to ashes with dragonfire and never rebuilt. The Valyrian freehold, as it called, absorbs all of the Giscari's former territories to their east, including all of the Giscari colony cities in Slavers Bay, such as Astapor, Yunkai, and Marine. During this time they would make sure their hold over these territory is absolute, and with time Valyrian would start dwelling onto magic arts, some even dark. But even after the death Mayavar or even his grandson again their descendants wanted more power and land. But that will come to end. After this Ryanish wars and Aragon started using animals to spy and he slowly built a network of his own. This was just the start, while Aragon would summon 2 more heroes, Finrod and Legolas. Finrod, also known fully as Finrod Felagund, he was king of Nargothrond and the eldest son of Finarfin and Irwin, and the brother of Galadriel. He was said to be the noblest of the elves. Legolas, who was part of the Fellowship of the Ring in the Third Age. Son of the elven king Thranduil of Mirkwood, Legolas was Mirkwood's prince, a messenger, and a master archer with his keen eyesight, sensitive hearing, and excellent bowmanship. Basically he is an immortal, stronger Hawkeye without his trick arrows. 9 comments 0 vote. Finrod and Legolas. While the Valyrians were absorbing the Giscari territories, Aragon, who had gained quite huge number of SP, summoned Finrod and Legolas. Legolas was given a batch of Sindar elves. Aragon did think of summoning Tauriel, having had a crush on the women for a while, but decided against it for now, since he remembered Tauriel had romantic feelings for Keely. Since almost all the elves or dwarves who had wives were waiting for their other, it was heartbreaking to see. So he was able to summon Fingolfin, Olwe, Finarfin's, Durin and Telchar's wives. Those that didn't like Legolas probably settled down with either elf or human, since Valar are shown to bless humans, who have fallen in love with each other. But they do judge both to make sure this isn't deception by the humans to get immortality. Even then elves seem to really reluctant to have a relationship with humans. Aragon got along with Finrod and Legolas really easily. Finrod seems to be a lot easygoing because he is not under lot of pressure to be the king. Also with his father Finarfin and uncle Fingolfin still alive, he didn't seem to be pressured to being the king of Noldor elves. Also not having to worry about Melkor or Sauron made it less tense. But he knew this land had its own problems. The race of men here seems to have given themselves to greed and power. He was saddened by it, but still saw many in their own land was peaceful. Aragon had brought Finarfin with some of the SP, because he heard tales about Finarfin being considered fairest and wisest of the Finwë's son, who were Fëanor, Fingolfin, Finarfin, Eirime, and Findes. Finarfin founded his own royal house known as the Golden House of Finarfin. Uniquely among the Noldor, he and his descendants had golden hair inherited from his Vanurine mother Indus. Now all three were in the forest of Mirkwood, which is where Legolas is starting to settle with his people. They are. With Finrod having challenged Legolas to challenge of archery. Legolas knocks an arrow, and fires. The arrow streaks down and hits right in the center on the target. But that wasn't enough, with quickly taking another arrow from his quiver, knock it at lightning speed and then shoots the arrow and which hits the center of the target, splitting his previous arrow in half. Legolas then just gave Finrod his smirk, as Finrod sulked and muttered, "Yeah, you are amazing with a bow." Finrod's eyes once again lit up and challenged, "Now we try match of swordsmanship." Aragorn chuckled and said, "You two really lighting up the place, since I am usually stuck with Fingolfin or older, both are stuck with formalities and traditions." Finrod and Legolas could understand after all the two elves are taught at young age on how to act around people and stuff. Aragorn seeing Finrod looking slightly melancholy asked, "Thinking about your family?" Finrod nodded and said, "It was great to see my father again, so I am looking forward seeing my family again." Most of elves and dwarves are told or think that the Valar are going to bring back their loved ones, when the time is perfect. Finrod looking at the sky thought, "We will be together again Amari." While Legolas was the same muttered, "I am looking forward to seeing my father and mother too." Aragorn remembered Legolas' father Thranduil, but didn't remember his mother. Legolas wanting to change the atmosphere said, "Let's go back inside." So they are led over a bridge and into the woodland realm. After they pass through, Legolas addresses the guards of the gate. Hollow in Enon. Basically, close the gate. Aragorn looking around said, "This place has peaceful atmosphere." Legolas smiled and said, "I am grateful to Lady Yavanna and Lord All for this." Legolas could tell the place was more beautiful and had majestic feeling to it than his previous home. Aragorn and are led through the raised wooden walkways of the woodland realm. The entire place is built out of tree roots in a subterranean cavern. 5 comments 0 vote. So the events. So some of the events would be brief and I don't want to drag it too much, like Maegor Targaryen or Maegor the Cruel Rule. Dance of the Dragon is slightly different. Then there is Blackfire Rebellions. Then it would be time skip to Robert's Rebellion. 6 comments 0 vote. Visit from all. While Aragorn was now sitting on the forest enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, that's when Aragorn heard the ground rumble and shake a bit and all slowly taking form from the earth. He was rugged man with huge beard and hammer by his side. All viewed Aragorn as his own son. The boy was respectful and learned everything he taught him to heart. The same was with Ulmo, while all arrival shocked bowed and greeted, "Lord All, welcome." All smiled and replied, "Don't be so stiff, lad. I came here to tell you something." Aragorn smiled and asked, "So what can I do for you Master All?" All shaking his head and replied, "There is ore deposit to the mountains in the east that is ready for your people." Aragorn was slightly surprised hearing this. He didn't hear anything from the system either. All recognized the confusion in Aragorn's face explained, "We wanted you and your people to be adept with smithing before because this particular ore can be nasty if it isn't used right. So we waited until we were sure you could handle it." Aragorn was slightly worried after the Valar waited this much before telling him, as he asked, "What is so special about this sword?" All sighed and said, "Normally it takes a very skilled smith to create a weapon filled with his intent like Glamdring and Sting, Orcrist glowed whenever evil were near. But this particular ore takes the full intent of the creator within itself. It could become sword filled with malice, if the creator intent was it, or it could be sword of great power and hope, if the creator wanted it to protect people with it. Also have certain level sentience." Aragorn's eyes widened as he thought, "That is quite dangerous." System telepathically told Aragorn, "This is the same ore Eol used to create it. Yes, host, this particular ore if used correctly would be dangerous." This was present in LOTR universe. You may heard of Eol creation. Anglachel seems to have held a certain level of sentient awareness, poured into it from Eol. It was fierce and bloodthirsty, drinking the blood of those it bit. "From no blood wilt thou shrink," said Turin after seeing it unharmed by the scorching blood of Gloring. Nevertheless, innocent blood left a terrible shroud of grief on the sword. The sword will grow in sentience and would be able to communicate with its owner. It has happened before with Turin Tarambar. Then Aragorn heard a female's voice saying, "There is malice in this sword. The dark heart of the smith still dwells in it. It will not love the hand it serves, neither will it abide with you long." Aragorn had many idea for weapons for this ore like certain hammer of thunder god, but he was also wary of it. All's voice broke him out of his thoughts. This deposit is what people of here iron that fell from heaven is a flaming star. All taps his feet on the ground as the sand started hover and form a model's earth. A meteorite drifts into frame, heading towards tiny Earth. Off in the distance the meteorite hits what looked like RHE continent of Middle Earth. Aragon thoughts flowed, so a huge meteorite deposit. All patting Aragon and asked, "Do you have anything to ask, lad?" Aragon was thoughtful, remembering something asked, "Is there method to two different metals into a singular design?" All hummed understanding where Aragon was going asked, "Do you mean mithril and other ores, lad?" Aragon nodded and all answered, "It is possible, but not easy for anyone without my blessing. It will take time and you would only be able to produce a handful of blades at a time." Aragon was okay with it. After all, he was thinking of creating weapons for people close to him. All seeing that lad was going with it, smiled and headed towards the nearby forge where he explained and showed the process clearly. Aragon learned why this was considered impossible. There were quite a few methods to get new type of steel, like mixing dragon blood in with mithril. Another was using elven or dwarven blood with dragon fire to get another time. Both needed their own forging techniques. Aragon discussed many things with all about using airships and locomotives. But all explained everything. Before all may have jumped to create these. But now, having lived with Yavanna for a long time, he slowly came to understand how some of these would have drastic effects on nature, which would later on harm the races. All told Aragon, these projects would probably take 1,000 years to get any basic results. Since you have to find magical alternatives for locomotives and for airships, you have to make it safe. So you will have to take your time and do tests. Aragon nodded and thought, "True, I will never take the blueprints of the trains, since the chances are huge they would destroy this world just like my previous world gone downhill. But if I make it run with just magic, then that is game changer. But again, it will take 1,000 years of research and tests to get there." Someone pointed out, "I don't have to go through all these historical events, I know most of it is like info dump. But having read them I feel some of these events will happen regardless, like 1. Targaryens being attacked by Faith of 7 for 7. Which was during Maegor's time, and another is the Blackfire Rebellion, which is crucial for my story and with some changes. 23 comments 0 vote. Chapter 18. Aragon mined some of the meteorite to work on his swords. He decided to create 3 swords. One was sword with slightly dark intent. It was a wine red sword and is attached to a solid antique metal dragon hand guard. The pommel of the sword contains a simulated blue sapphire, cradled by 2 dragon tails. This was a bit bloody thirsty, but not too much, and interestingly dragon killer as the system described it. The second one was light sword that filled people with hope. This sword has a double-edged blade. It has a cruciform cross guard. The arms of the silver-colored cross guard angle towards the blade. The hilt continues with a brown leather-wrapped grip. The hilt ends with a fan-shaped pommel with a white gem on it. Then there was the runic inscriptions embedded in the blade. Aragon held the sword with both hands, causing the white gem in pommel to light up. The last sword was more gray sword. It was blend between dark and light. The sword lettering down the middle of the blade glows. All of them were created with different intent and it worked. He looked at Fingolfin, Olwe, Gandalf, Durin and Telchar, who were expecting the swords. Durin with awe said, "Lad, these swords are amazing." Telchar agreed, but still added, "But the red one is quite bloodthirsty." Gandalf with slight grim muttered, "Yes, it is a bit dark." Aragon nodded said, "I wanted to make on with different intent." They all nodded as Aragon seriously told both Durin and Telchar, "I want mountain fortified, so no none just mines these ores without permission. These are not something normal smiths could handle." All himself warned this could have disastrous effects for those that are master smiths or has all's blessing. Fingolfin nodded and replied, "I will send couple of my best elves and Finarfin to guard this place." Durin raised his hand and added, "I will also send some of my best dwarves to help." So the mines where the meteorite was found was guarded very seriously. The Valar steel or bright steel is different. It depends on the creator, as it could become black as night if the creator is filled with malice and grayish white if the opposite. The sword would have sentience and actually provide the user with extra danger sense. It could talk to its owner, if it gets attached to him or her. The steel is special and it will do his best to make sure owner fight at its best, but if it is enemy takes it, the sword would resist and cause issues for the wielder. The other type is Kale's magic steel. When made from combination of mithril and elven steel, it is bonded with help of dragon blood and dragon fire. Magic steel is made into a sword has cross-hatched pattern which gets a light purple glow, when it clashes with another sword or shield. It isn't not as too eye-catching. But they were able to create 8 swords with Valar steel. Fingolfin, Finrod, Finarfin, Galadriel, Olwe, Legolas, Gandalf and Ulrich Aladrin each took one which was best for them. The Ulrich's sword was called Fenris and would become their heirloom and family sword for Aldrins. Aragorn was now working on airship, but runic inscriptions and enchantments were hard to create on something so huge. So he decided to start with something small, which was horse-drawn carriages, and carriages would be floating instead of having wheels. While drawing plans was one thing, making it work was whole different matter. The floating carriages had many issues with it, like from carriages flipping to comfort. While working on it, Gandalf came into his study, seeing the stacks of paper all over the palace, asked, "I see you are really busy." Aragorn groaned and replied, "Yes." Then questioned, "What can do for you, Gandalf?" Gandalf sighed and replied, "There has been an issue in Westeros. It seems Lannister proposed a marriage with Stark, but you can guess it was rejected. Their Lord Leonard Lannister took it as an insult, but he knew going to war with Starks isn't good idea, so he started doing in villages in north, they raped and pillaged any village they attacked." Aragorn was disgusted, asked, "Let me guess, Harold didn't take this laying down." Harold Stark was the new king of North. The boy looked up to Ulrich and Aragorn greatly. He literally took Aragorn's words, "Be kind to your allies, but be ruthless to your enemies." Gandalf sighed and replied, "Yes, he was able to get 60 men group and he killed every one of them and left their dead bodies on the border impaled on posts. Now everyone is calling him the Bloody Wolf or Harold the Impaler, even though the impaling part is not something he did single-handedly done." 6 comments 0 vote. Discord. I am not good with Discord, so this group is really basic. The place is really just to discuss different ideas for the fanfic. Web links. 6 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Just _for _fun 1997. Download app now. Harold Stark draft. Harold Stark wasn't going to let this go, so he took his banner man and fleet from Stony Shore to Lannisport. They prayed to Ulmo for safe and fast journey. Harold Stark and his men quickly arrived in Lannisport, then the chaos and bloody mess started. With how quickly the North responded, Leonard Lannister couldn't muster a full-powered response in time. The battle was bloody and Leonard Lannister knew the Castle Rock would be breached soon and they had much greater casualty than. So Leonard Lannister met with Harold Stark, who was drenched in blood, the name Bloody Wolf. The Lannister had to part with a lot of their wealth to compensate the damages. This would create in Westerland's wealth, but also ego and prestige. While going back, Harold Stark simply said, "A wolf always protects its pack and it doesn't care the enemy is lion or not." This would make the Lannisters hate the Starks, but they also wary of the North. This defeat would still be shadow over the Lannisters, who would always have slight fear of the North. Only ones who didn't take them seriously ended up with Lot, and this would be arrogant father and daughter pair. While Aragorn met up with Harold, who had strong build and huge beard. He was wearing a wolf fur around his shoulders and didn't look one bit guilty, as Harold, having a stoic face, replied, "If you are going to scold me saying I am impulsive, then I don't care. They attacked my people and I returned it to them in kind." Aragorn sighed and replied, "I am not here to scold you for your impulsiveness. Since what you did was the right thing." Harold was shocked as Aragorn continued, "If you had let this go, the small folk would have lost faith in you, and another issue is Westerlands would become bolder with their attacks. That is not something you could afford. With this you showed that you are not one to take it lying down." Aragorn, patting Harold in the shoulder, walked away. While all this was happening, Gandalf was going to Rhoynar, since there. Nymeria, the warrior queen of the Rhoynar, Gandalf, having finalized the trading agreement, was happy to present the sword made from magic steel. Nymeria, while doing couple of test swings, were shocked at how light and sharp the sword was, so she questioned, "Is this made of Valyrian steel?" Gandalf shook his head and replied, "No, this is something our people created themselves. But it is strong enough to damage Valyrian steel." Nymeria looked at Gandalf as if he had grown another head, but decided to test it on Valyrian steel sword she had bought, and let's just say the results shocked her. The Valyrian steel sword was actually chipped off. Nymeria, with gleam in her eyes, asked, "Could you sell more of these swords to us?" Gandalf smoothly lied, "No, I am afraid these are harder to make and it takes time to create one too." Nymeria sighed and muttered, "I guess that is true. But with next 10 years the Rhiannar would face the Valyrians." 3 comments 0 vote. Ryonish Wars Draft. The Valyrian expansion brings them into conflict with Nymeria, the warrior queen of the Rhoynar, realizes that they cannot stand against dragons, and in incredible coincidence Gandalf, seeing their plight, helps them escape to Westeros. On the ships the Ryonish inhabitants with their queen Nymeria watches as dragons hovers above their city, they unleashes flames and destroying many things in the inferno. Nymeria teared up seeing this, asked Gandalf with slight fear, "Will they not see us?" Gandalf shook his head and replied, "No, I made sure to cover the ship with my magic. So they won't be able to see it hear us." Originally Gandalf was thinking of bringing them to Middle-earth, but Galadriel told him, it is best for them to move to Middle-earth. So Rhoynar with their queen Nymeria migrated to Dorne, after being driven from the Rhoyne River network in Essos by the Valyrians. There Nymeria would marry Lord Mors Martell and helps House Martell conquer the rest of Dorne, finally unifying the region as one kingdom. Nymeria has openly took Gandalf as friend of Dorne and even took the religion as Valar to show she values his friendship. She was smart enough to recognize how valuable Gandalf was. This was heard by great-great-grandson of Maiavar. Revis Erthian heard some wonders about immortal beings in Middle-earth. This was supplied by some Sanner traders who had connection with Westeros, so greedy to know about the secrets of immortality, Valyria decided to launch an attack on Middle-earth, taking many of their dragon riders and quite number ships with them. The Valyrian dragon riders soars through a cloudless sky, over an oceans, giving a roar to make the enemy fear them. It was their arrogance that led to their defeat. When their group of Valyrian dragons swooped down to Middle-earth, they didn't expect an army waiting for them. But that wasn't all, a whole group of dragon with their riders were hovering over the army. Some of these dragons were humongous and way bigger than any of their. The shock was broken. When the dwarven repeater scorpion launches multiple black arrow and it flies off at high speed, it hurtles through the air and sinks all the way to the feathers, pierces the scales and into dragon's chest and completely comes out of his back. Some of dragons are shot in wings and lungs, they forward in pain and fear, then struggles to fly into the sky with massive effort before falling into the sea. Revis watched as multiple black arrows zipped through the air at speeds which made none of even able to react as their dragons got shot down and fallen to sea dead. Revis was able to hide behind the another rider, who got shot. The dragon roared and wheezing in pain, then gasps for breath. Revis could see the dragon's eyes lose their light, and it falls back down into the sea. Revis, fearing for his life, quickly ordered retreat back to Valyria. The remaining survivors retreated. When they returned to Valyria, Revis found out their ships all were drowned. Revis was mad in his own way. This defeat made him lose face. He made sure to swear all the survivors to secrecy, but few of them still kept records. Among them was a Targaryen, whose accounts would be later read by Rhaenys and Visenya. So he with other survivors started practicing blood magic and other dark arts, delving deep into the earth for secrets and twisting the flesh of beasts and men to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. All this to conquer Middle-earth, which again caused problems for Valyria. This brought the destruction of Valyria by angering not just the Valar and their own gods. So before taking action, the Valyrian gods was able to send a vision to some of the houses they had chosen to survive this whole thing, but only one of them took it seriously. That was Daenerys Targaryen, had a vision of impending catastrophe and arranged to have his family removed from the freehold. The Targaryen family took control of the island, which is used as a trading post with the Seven Kingdoms. Soon the doom of Valyria would happen. 12 comments, 0 vote. Doom of Valyria draft. A mighty double explosion followed by an earthquake shakes everything, and his people were shocked. This was slightly frequent, so most ignored it and went on with their daily lives. Some houses were rocked by the shake increasingly stronger. Around them, furniture, vases, trinkets, chairs and the mirror fall on the floor. Then white flakes are slowly falling over the beach. The spectacle is surreal. The flakes fall all around them. Many take some of them in the palm of their hands. It crumbles between their fingers. What they didn't know was these volcanoes were also sending out poisonous fumes into the air, and it was slowly making its way down. This made the air unbearable to even dragons, if they take it in for too long. People has gathered in the streets, staring and enjoying the spectacle, commenting on what they see in small groups. Some try to catch the ash that starts to cover the cobblestone, bantering. Revis, who in his castle seeing this was happy, smirked and said, "The god must be giving us a sign that we win against those pretender dragonlords." The sycophants who close to him smiled and replied, "Yes, you are right, Mexers may be blessing us." Some of shop owners collect pieces of their merchandise fall during the earthquake. Others keep on going at their business as nothing has happened. It is busy, yet no one seems to be in a hurry. In Valyria, everyday life goes on. But an explosion is heard and people looks to the 14 fires and they slowly steps back in the so-called 14 fires. All volcanoes have their top has exploded, sending a gigantic cloud as black as ink in the blue summer sky. Now doubt and panic started as people run through the city, the more obscureness increases, the smoke spreading over. Streets are rife of ash that gathers on the ground and penetrates everywhere. People pack their stuff on carriages. The horses, whinnying, are getting mad. Unending tremors go on unabated, shaking buildings and people. In earthquake the soldiers stagger, trying to stay up, when the house by them falls apart. Big stones collapse, smashing two of them. This is hell as the some start to see the effect the fumes and starts to cough. They holds their throat and heads for a water, some went to the fountain. There's no water running. The fumes are affecting everyone and many dragon lords, who were fearing for their lives tried to flee with on their dragons, but the result was not nice as either they are killed by toxic fumes in the air or rocks mixed with liquid lava start to fall around from the sky and explode. Some people who struck by one of them becomes a human torch. Several houses are now ablaze and collapsing. Broad sheets of fire leap into the dark sky, the darkness amplifies over the city. No matter how much dragon lords or people tried, 14 volcanoes erupting together caused flaming hailstones to be everywhere in the sky, making it a no-go area. Those that bravely flew their dragons to try and avoid the hailstones, were again brought down by them. All the 14 volcanoes' roar is now deafening. In the streets of Valyria, and although the burning houses, it is now complete darkness, just like a room when it's shut up and all the lights put out. All around, people just can hear shrieks of women, screams of the children and the shouts of men. Some call for their children, their parents. An earthquake roars and twitters all and everyone around as some soldiers stumble on the sand, kind of small tsunami unfurls on the beach, destabilizing several soldiers. The houses in flames, people running anywhere, screaming, praying for the Valyrian gods, and some dying. Many ran to the ports, but once again fireballs are falling from the sky, whistling. As they touch the ground, they explode, killing many. Nothing is safe. People trying to get into the ships faced another problem, which was the waves run extremely high and boisterous caused by the earthquakes. All the ships are incredibly shaken and none made it out alive through the dangerous seas. A gigantic flow of clouds is running down like an avalanche from all the volcanic slopes with amazing speeds, devouring everything on its way in a deafening thunder. Valyrian gazes at the cloud coming to them, terrified. As the cloud swoops down on the city wall, the people are instantly burned and turned to ashes. The pyroclastic surge travels across the streets at great speeds, burns, knocks down, shatters, buries, or carries away nearly all objects and structures on its way. The searing ash insinuates itself in each cranny, hole and covers everything. The more the flow advances, the more is gathering rock and woody debris, and increases its sordid power. As the thunder approaches, Revas in shock mutters, "Have the gods really abandoned us?" And raises his head to see the surge of hot, dry rock fragment and gases. Many Valyrians pray to their gods, but no results. The cloud envelops the harbor and inflames the boats and ships by the piers. The flow now covers the sea and large columns of steam are swept away along with the ashes. The pyroclastic surge reaches the seaside and passes in front of the grotto, whistling and spreading all over the beach and the cliff. The whole beach is covered with a steaming thin blanket of white finer-grained ash and cool lava fragments. The volcanic activity would continue even 4 centuries after the original eruptions, with the water often turning poisonous and giving off fumes that can kill. 13 comments 0 vote. The Iron Bank. Aragon after the doom of Valyria called for a council meeting. Fingolfin, Finrod, Olwe, Gandalf, Telchar, Fëanor and Durin all attended the meeting. Finrod questioned, "So Valyria really fell?" Aragon nodded and answered, "Yes, the 14 fires erupted and there was no survivors." Gandalf with sadness muttered, "An empire big as theirs that disappeared in just a day." Everyone felt bad for the innocents that died, but this is life, as Durin added. Lord All has deposited a huge pile of Valyrian swords, jewels and even dragon eggs after the doom. The message was that, I didn't want this to be wasted under molten rocks. Some of them nodded as Aragon said, "Now 5 Valyria's outlying colony cities began breaking away and asserting their independence, things are going to get chaotic." Finrod with disgust said, "Worse, without the Valyrian dragons to keep them in check anymore, the Dothraki-mounted hordes are slowly spilling out of the central plains of Essos." Aragon nodded with sigh said, "We contain the fights as much as possible without them spilling out to Westeros or our side." Everyone nodded, while Aragon turned to Gandalf and asked, "What about the Iron Back?" Iron Bank was formed by after the idea brought by successful trader and craftsman. They asked Middle-earth for support, which Aragon agreed to. The Iron Bank was created with help of dwarves and it was grander than anything the people saw in Grey Haven. Also Aragon helped create 2 vaults, the most intricate and hard to crack. The first was the Rheingold safe. It was designed with 3 dials. The design itself had many dwarven inscriptions and designs. The second was Siegfried safe, had 7 dials, making it one of the trickiest safes to crack. Even a dragon fire won't do anything. Gandalf answered, they are slowly becoming the most powerful banking institution in the known world, richer and more powerful as time goes. Olwe added, their methods of collecting debts while questionable, but it is needed, since quite a few princes or kings default on their debts or are foolish enough not to honor their agreements with the Iron Bank, then they will support the opposition new princes and kings with the Iron Bank's support. These new princes and kings then honor the previous debt along with paying back the money the bank loaned them in claiming their new power, lest they suffer the same fate as their predecessors. Saruman with a smirk said, they also have connection to House of Black and White, which is now worship Inf Death and Lord Mandos. Therefore some who refuse to pay die under questionable circumstances. The House of Black and White is a temple in Grey Haven dedicated to the many-faced god. While due to interesting circumstances Mandos has quite a huge weight there because Mandos is considered the judge and the just. For Aragon Mandos is the 6th greatest of the Lords of the Valar, and the 5th greatest Aratar. Aragon decided to change subject, what about the Yi-2? Olwe spoke up, we already have good relationship with present dynasty, which is called Yellow Emperor, his name is Chai Duk is called a god emperor of the Golden Empire of Yi-Ti and the 4th member of his dynasty. He has a wife a noblewoman of Valyria and even had a dragon at his court. Fingolfin asked, had a dragon? Olwe nodded and replied, yes, the dragon died of old age and the Valyrian women seems to be unable to give birth. I think Valyrians did something to her to make sure their bloodline didn't spread. Aragon hummed and muttered, probably. Slowly the meeting diverted to other topics like Ulrich Aldarin was succeeded by his daughter Joanne Aldarin to be the Lady of Helka. This was a law among the Numorians that even females could become heiress. I have been thinking of adding an LOTR women into the pairing could be 1. Arwen. 2. Tauriel. 3. Eowyn. 13 comments 0 vote. Arwen. Aragon first summoned Elrond, then his wife Celebrian and after that Elodin and Elrohir and Arwen Undomiel. This was suggested by the system since elves that chose mortal lives have some of their memories erased, it's sealed off because of how heartbreaking it is. A shimmering figure in white appear in front of Aragon. It Arwen, a young elven woman with braids of her dark hair were touched by no frost, her white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and the light of stars was in her bright eyes, grey as a cloudless night. Yet queenly she looked, and thought and knowledge were in her glance, as of one who has known many things that the years bring. Aragon was dazed by her beauty, he watched Arwen looked around to find someone she is familiar with, that's when she saw her father and brothers. The reunion was filled with tears and happiness. System explained how Arwen died heartbroken a year after Aragorn's death, it seems their whole life was not beautiful as Aragon had imagined. While Arwen loved her husband, she was filled with guilt in the later years after seeing the sadness in your father and brother's eyes. Also like any relationship Aragorn's and Arwen's relationship had their hurdles too. At the end the guilt Arwen had only increased because seeing the pain that she caused her father and brothers was too much for her to ignore. Also it was only after her death she found out the fact that mortals won't go to same place as elves or dwarves go to. Arwen was told how only at the end of Arda could she reunite with her parents and siblings. So most of her memories have been sealed off or erased because of her own wish to not remember them. Aragon was surprised hearing her fate, in the movie it looked as if both had happily ever after. Elrond was shocked seeing Fingolfin who was technically his great-great-grandfather. Fingolfin x Anair. Fingon, Turgon, Eredhel, and Argon. Turgon x Elenway. Idril x Tuor. Erendil x Elwing. Elrond Elros. Erendil was the father of Elros, who was the first king of Númenor, and of Elrond, the lord of Rivendell, and Elrond married Celebrian and is the father of Elodin and Elrohir and Arwen Undomiel. Arwen was sobbing seeing her mother after all this time, the reunion was sweet. While they were made aware of the situation, Elrond, who always had sweet spot for humanity, was not sure what to think about this world. But he was happy with Valar taking a much active role here. Aragon asked the system, should we summon Fëanor and his sons? Fëanor was the greatest craftsman, gemsmith, and warrior. Aragon was interested in the gems Fëanor could create, selling even handful of them would be huge help. System telepathically told Aragon, host, if you do summon them chances of infighting could occur because of Fener having bloody past with some of the elven friends you have now. Aragon then remembered Fener and his sons had taken part in kinslaying and Fener had a bad relationship with the house of Fingolfin. System added, I would suggest Celebrimbor, who is also Master Smith. He is remembered primarily for his creation of the 3 rings of power, Nenya, Bilya, and Narya, but also he made the second Elfstone. Aragon remembered the name. Celebrimbor was the son of Carufin and the grandson of Fener. Taking a nice little time out after this. 14 comments 0 vote. Chapter 24. Aragon got alone easily with Elodin and Elrohir who were friendly sort. Both of them, along with Arwen seemed to stick to their mother, whom they had missed a lot since her departure to the undying land or Aman. While their father Elrond because his leadership qualities and foresight, Aragon purposed him to join the council. Which Elrond agreed and he once again was given the spot in Rivendell. Arwen was quiet type, she wouldn't talk unless she was interested in the topic. Elodin after hearing about the dragon riders was slightly excited asked, so could we become dragon riders? Aragon nodded and replied, yes, the dragon would only hatch for the one destined to be its rider. Basically a dragon chooses its rider and if you are chosen by a dragon, the rider would get signs and visions. Once you touch the dragon egg destined or chosen for you, then a mark will appear on your palm. This creates a bond between the dragon and the rider making them able to communicate with each other through mind. Elodin and Elrohir looked at each other with smile and in unison said, that is amazing. While Arwen did show slight interest asked, I have seen people ride a creature called Griffin and Pegasus. A white Pegasus emerges from the trees. It was beautiful with his huge wings. Arwen was enchanted by it, as Aragon bringing her close to Arwen said, her name is Aurora. Arwen carefully pets her, as Aurora gives neigh. While Aragon seeing Aurora being calm around Arwen asked, do you want to ride her? Arwen shook her head and replied, I don't think I can. Aragon smiled and said, don't worry, I will ride with you. Arwen was not sure, but hesitantly nodded. Aragon helped her get on the horse, while he climbed on behind her. As the Aurora gallops forward, Arwen slides scarily back with Aragon making sure she is safe. Giant wings unfold, huge and powerful, and with a whoosh. They soar into the air rising higher and higher. Gradually, Arwen loosens his hold on Aurora's neck and losing herself in the joy of flying. Aragon asked, amazing isn't it? Art nodded with a whoosh. Aragon and Arwen plunge into sky astride. Pegasus, soaring toward forests of Rivendell. Arwen was smiling at the sight of her and Aurora shadow racing across the grass below circling swooping, and then swooping, with heart stopping. Speed. I was thinking about enchanted lordship rings, I mean they could detect if the heir in question is really their son or not. This would really make the whole Joffrey and Robin Arryn situation interesting. 12 comments 0 vote. Lord's Ring and Tapestry. The interesting thing is not all Starks are lovable as the ones from GOT. The Starks in Dance of the Dragon is said to be ruthless and power-hungry, it seems that's why South views North as savages. The Lord's Ring was enchanted by the Celebrimbor and Aragon to recognize bloodline like your future heir. The ring actually uses his enchantments to recognize, if the person is really the son or heir of previous lord. The ring had the sigils of their respective families, like Starks had Wolf. Of course there are ways for nephew or brothers to become the next lord, it is basically if the previous lord does have any living children. Also their protection to make sure that no one tries to unsurprising by killing the previous lord and heir, so the ring will reject them. If the heir is accepted then he will be automatically or magically entered into a family tapestry, which is a tapestry depicting the family tree. Which would contain all their family members and what connection they have with previous lord like son, nephew or brother. Other family members could enter themselves into the family tapestry by just putting a drop of their blood into it. But this also has enchantments that will recognize your bloodline, so fooling it is not really possible, since it will have the genetic marker of all your family members and ancestors. The Starks were the first to accept it, since this allowed them to see the family connection to previous Starks. The Stark family tapestry was depicting the family tree. It contained every image of family members dating back to the Bran the Builder and Torrek Stark. To make sure the family tapestry had the genetic marker of every late family members, Aragon had to talk with some of Valar, they more or less agreed. Mandos took a while to convince. Now in Winterfell Aaron Stark now was looking at the Stark tapestry. He had certain nostalgic feelings seeing the images of his father, grandfather and pride seeing his ancestors. The tapestry had old and ancient feeling. Nevertheless, the white thread with which it was embroidered still glowed brightly enough to show them a sprawling family tree dating back to ages of Bran the Builder. Large words at the very top of the tapestry read, "Winter is coming." Aaron muttered, "They would have loved it." Aragon walked next to him and whispered, "Yes, they would, especially you grandfather Harold." Aaron remembered his old grandfather, who was in his prime known as Harold the Impaler. It was something unbelievable when he first heard it. Aaron looked at the image of his Harrison Stark, with sadness and thought, if only you were here to see your grandson father. Aragon sensing the atmosphere asked, "How is Torrhen doing?" Aaron breaking out of his mood replied, "He is doing good, but he seems to have a habit of overthinking and being slight paranoid." Aragon chuckled patting Aaron said, "Don't worry, he will mature with time." Then the news spread, many followed like their vassals. Then Dorne, Reach, etc. Only ones who didn't was Storm King, Lannister and their vassals. But interesting thing was just year into it a scandal broke out about the House of Hightower. It was found that Lord Varys Hightower's oldest son was not his, it was huge. No matter how much the wife in question tried to blame the North, Varys wanted this to be false, so he tried his 3 other sons and each came out without any issue. All 3 showed to be his bloodline. Varys went far as to bring the lineages and histories of the great houses of the 7 kingdoms, a book detailing genealogies of the nobility, which notes the hereditary preponderance of each houses. Varys' older son had blue eyes and slight sturdy build, while all his other children had slight brownish hair and smaller build. Varys at time didn't note of this, thinking his eldest son got his traits from mother's side of the family. The investigation proved oldest son was not from Varys and his wife is killed and former son exiled. It was quite the problem. So the lordship rings became a must with time and many started asking the Starks for one, but not everyone got it. Another thing was some houses rejected it, like House Reign of Castamere was a noble house from the Castamere in the Westerlands. Aragon did little digging and found out the now Reign family was actually cut off the original bloodline because their son was technically a bastard. Also after next 2 chapters Aegon's conquest starts and North will be separate kingdom, with Aegon's daughter marrying the Starks. 11 comments 0 vote. Chapter 29. This a very boring chapter that contains some of the LOTR lore, I know many would be bored. So I posted another chapter to make up for it. Aragon saw Arwen watching the night sky. When he went for walk, she was drawing in her note. So being curious, he joined her. Arwen was surprised seeing Aragon, said, "I didn't see you there, Aragon." Aragon shook it up and asked, "Can I join you?" Arwen gestured him to sit, as Aragon moves beside her, seeing her notebook. He opens it, turns to the page which bears a sketch of the constellations. He takes the pen from the notebook, begins to add to the sketch, leading from one point to another in space. They discuss about different stars and constellations. Aragon asked, "So you are interested in the stars created by Lady Varda?" Arwen nodded with a huge smile and explained, "Lady Varda came to Arda with her husband, Lord Manwë, and the other Valar in the beginning of days. She aided Lord Manwë in the rule of Arda and the watching of Middle-earth. She made the stars, she looked out from the height of Tawnikettle, and beheld the darkness of Middle-earth beneath the innumerable stars, faint and far. Then she began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since their coming into Arda. She took the silver dews from the vats of Telperion, and therewith she made new stars and brighter against the coming of the firstborn. Wherefore she whose name out of the deeps of time and the labors of Ea was Tintal, the kindler, was called after by the elves Elentari, queen of the stars. Carnal, Mars, and Luiniel, Nennar and Lumbar, Alcaranc, Jupiter, and Elemir, Mercury, she wrought in that time, and many other of the ancient stars she gathered together and set as signs in the heavens of Arda. Wilwaran, Cassiopeia, Telemendal, Seronum, means, eagle of the west. Aquila or Lyra, and Anarima, Gemini, and Menelmacar, means, swordsman of the sky, today known as Orion with his shining belt, that forebodes the last battle that shall be at the end of days. And high in the north as a challenge to Melkor she set the crown of 7 mighty stars to swing, Valisirka, 7 stars. Also known as, Durin's crown, today known as Ursa Major, this constellation was created through the joint efforts of all in Varda. All was working on making a silver sickle, and when he struck it with his hammer 7 sparks flew up into the sky. Varda quickly caught them and set them in the northern sky as a challenge and a warning to Morgoth of his eventual downfall. The sickle of the Valar and sign of doom. It is told that even as Varda ended her labors, and they were long, when first Menelmakar strode up the sky and the blue fire of Heluan, Sirius, flickered in the mists above the borders of the world, in that hour the children of the earth awoke, the firstborn of Iluvatar. By the starlit mirror of Quivianan, water of awakening, they rose from the sleep of Iluvatar. And while they dwelt yet silent by Quivianan, their eyes beheld first of all things the stars of heaven. Therefore they have ever loved the starlight, and have revered Varda Elantari above all the Valar. Basically mirroring the same constellations now, Aragon looking at the night sky muttered, Lady Varda Star Maker. They look at each other, nods, and they smile. This is going to be a long night. Aragon had a small smile on his face. He loved this moment. Asked, what about the sun and the moon? Arwen with slight sadness replied, as you know, the two trees of Valinor, also known as the trees of the Valar or simply the two trees, were Laurelin, the gold tree, and Telperion, the silver tree, which brought light into the land of the Valar in ancient times. They were destroyed by Melkor and the primal spider Ungoliant. Arwen's distaste for Morgoth and Ungoliant was evident in her tone, as she continued, after their destruction Yavanna sang alone in the shadows. Yet even as hope failed and her song faltered, Telperion bore at last upon a leafless bough one great flower of silver, and Laurelin a single fruit of gold. These Yavanna took. And then the trees died, and their lifeless stems stand yet in Valinor, a memorial of vanished joy. But the flower and the fruit Yavanna gave to all, and Manwë hallowed them, and all and his people made vessels to hold them and preserve their radiance, as is said in the Narsillion, the song of the sun and moon. These vessels the Valar gave to Varda, that they might become lamps of heaven, outshining the ancient stars, being nearer to Arda. And she gave them power to traverse the lower regions of Ilmen, and set them to voyage upon appointed courses above the girdle of the earth from the west unto the east and to return. The sun was a heavenly creation of the Valar all. He and his people made a vessel to hold the radiance of the last fruit of Laurelin. The vessel of the sun was guided by Arion, a Maiar of Vanna. All used same method to create a vessel, to hold the radiance of the last flower of Telperion, the elder of the two trees of Valinor. Thus creating the moon, Maya Tilion, a hunter of the company of the Vala Orom, was chosen to guide the vessel of the moon. Arwen and Aragon talked about all these stories throughout the night, while both grew tired and fell asleep. Arwen was sleeping beside Aragon on the blankets on the rooftop. While Aragon stares up at the night sky. She rolls close to him, nuzzles against him in her sleep. He looks down at her, beautiful in the moonlight. 10 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Just _for _fun 1997. Download app now. Aegon the Conqueror. As time went by, Arwen grew close to Aragon and started a romantic relationship. Aragon had his own issues as he was made by the systems to help create Valinor with everything from the First Age, like the two trees, Laurelin, the gold tree, and Telperion, the silver tree. It was huge work and took a lot of time and effort. This was a shocking discovery for everyone from Middle-earth. While this was happening in Westeros, Aegon Targaryen came with his sisters' wives Rhaenys and Visenya. They were followed by their dragons Balerion, Vhagar, and Meryxes. They started their conquest in Westeros. Aegon Targaryen with Visenya and Rhaenys conquered Westerlands, Vale, Stormlands and Riverlands. Even the Reach, since Mern Ix Gardener of the Reach, had strained his relationship with Middle-earth and Aragon after calling Aragon and Valar demons, since he was an avid follower of Faith of that Seven. So having allied himself with King Loren the First Lannister of the Rock in the climactic battle of the Conquest, which becomes known as the Field of Fire. All three dragons are unleashed in the same battle for the first and only time, and more than 4,000 men are burned alive by the dragons. The only one smart enough was Marius Tyrell, who ignored the call and still followed the Valar. House of Gardener went extinct and Marius Tyrell was now the Lord of Reach. But now the problem was Dorne and North. Aegon was looking at the map with North marked with Direwolf on it as he said, "This is going to end badly for us." Orys Baratheon, who was the bastard half-brother of Aegon, questioned, "What do you mean by that, Aegon?" Visenya, who was standing next to Aegon. She possessed the classical Valyrian features, long, silver-gold hair, which was braided in purple eyes. She was considered a harsher, more austere beauty than her sister, Rhaenys, a voluptuous, sensual, and passionate woman. Visenya answered, "What Aegon means is, the North has the support of Middle-earth, which is the very powerful kingdom. In the past, Valyria with more than 20 dragons tried to invade Middle-earth, the result was Valyria's complete defeat. One of the survivors was an ancestor of the Targaryen house. The dragons were completely shot down. Oris was shocked while Visenya added, in his records, our ancestor added the fact they had dragons bigger than any dragon they had ever seen. Oris was sure his brother was the only one with dragons after the doom, but now he was hearing about another place other than Valyria that had dragons. Aegon with a grim tone spoke up, add to the fact there is mystical race living there, who are immortals. While I took it as a fairy tale. But we have multiple witnesses from Marius Tyrell to Lord Tully who has seen men who don't seem to age. Rhaenys questioned, so what do we do? Aegon was thoughtful and answered, we will have to let one of their children marry into the family. Thus bringing them into our rule through marriage. Visenya was not sure asked, are you sure? I mean North never married someone outside of their land, especially with the faith of seven always demeaning their god Valar as evil. Visenya found the Valar to be much better than faith of the seven, but again they needed support to conquer the land. Aegon sighed and replied, we will see how this goes. Should the North become part of Targaryen's dynasty through marriage or be an independent kingdom? 1. Middle-earth can't be North's only ally and they could suffer from the dragons because of another Targaryen king wanting to conquer them. I mean an army of Middle-earth can't reach North on a blink of an eye. 15 comments 0 vote. Decision. So Starks are going to marry a Targaryen princess and bring her to the North and they will sign a non-aggression pact with Targaryens. Also I will probably skip Maegor the Cruel's reign and start Dance of the Dragon or House of Dragon after this. Some of the things like Aemma, Rhaenyra mother, dying and Viserys marrying Alicent Hightower will be the same. Some of the events will change, some won't change much. 8 comments 0 vote. Aegon in Winterfell. Aegon, Visenya, Rhaenys with some of their trusted men were thundering across the forest on their horses. They were going to Winterfell to meet Torrhen Stark about making an alliance or pact. They slowed down to rest their horses. Aegon looked around from his horse, as Rhaenys muttered, why couldn't we come on our dragons? Visenya slightly annoyed answered, because that would send the wrong message, we want to make an alliance with them, rather than making them our enemy. They soon wheeled their horses around and thunder off towards Winterfell. When they arrived there was 3 people, he recognized all of them. King Aragon of Middle-earth, Gandalf the Grey and King Torrhen Stark, who was lean, and tall, with a shaggy head of dark hair flecked with gray, and in a pale stern face a pair of keen gray eyes. He was wielding Stark family ancestral sword Wolf Tooth. Both Gandalf and Aragon gave small smile, while Torrhen Stark keeping fake smile said, welcome to Winterfell. Aegon could sense the atmosphere was slightly tense, so with smile replied, yes, I have heard many things about the famous home of the Starks. Torrhen nodded and guided them inside, while Visenya was slightly awed by the design of the place, she could tell the place was thriving. Winterfell is a huge castle complex spanning several acres and protected by massive walls built in concentric circles, like the rings of a tree. First, the ring wall, then the outer circle. At the center of everything is Castle of Starks. The inside the outer circle is a village outside, the Winter Town. Inside the walls, the complex is composed of dozens of courtyards and small open spaces. Weapons training and practice take place in those yards. Winterfell's towers and halls have diamond-shaped window panes. Upon entering the castle Aegon, Rhaenys and Visenya could tell a warmth was surrounding them. Gandalf seeing this smiled and said, it is the natural hot springs. The water is piped through walls and chambers to heat them, making Winterfell more comfortable than other castles during the harsh northern winters. Then they led to the meeting hall features a long table, a massive hearth with a wolf's head carved into the stone above it, all of them room their seats. While Torrhen decided to be blunt and asked, so what does the great Aegon the Conqueror want with a small king like me? Aegon hearing this chuckled, since he has not heard the blunt talk for a while now. So he decided to be honest and replied, I want an alliance with your kingdom by marriage either to my future daughter or granddaughter. Torrhen Stark frowned and he could guess, his connection with Middle-earth is what made them choose this path. 'While Aragon was studying Aegon asked, there is something else isn't there, you didn't choose Westeros on an whim, from what I understand Esso has pleading you to intervene in the free cities. You could have easily made them follow you with your dragons and Valyrian heritage, there was not need to please the people of Westeros, who still see you as an outsider. There's something more that made you come to Westeros. Aegon's eyes widened, same with Rhaenys and Visenya were also slightly shocked. Aegon saw this was chance to come clean about his vision. Aegon took a deep breath and explained, you probably know about Daenerys the Dreamer, who foresaw the doom of Valyria. Aragon, Torrhen and Gandalf nodded as Aegon continued, I also had vision of sorts, it was like terrible winter, gusting out of the distant north, that would destroy the world of the living. It was white figure with glowing blue eyes. This caused Tauren, Aragorn and Gandalf to understand what they were talking about. Tauren slumped into this chair and muttered, "So just like you said, Aragorn, the White Walkers are going to come back." Tauren had taken Aragorn's request about White Walkers seriously and had recruited people to guard the wall. But a part of him wished it was not real. The recruitment part was tough at first, but after Aragorn proposed to give the people certain rewards like reduced tax and free entry for their children into the Tower of Knowledge made the recruitment increase by a lot. This caught Aegon, Rhaenys and Visenya's interest, since they seemed to know what the threat. Aegon asked, "White Walkers?" Aragorn answered, "In that darkness the White Walkers came for the first time. They swept through cities and kingdoms, riding their dead horses, hunting with their packs of pale spiders big as hounds. Most think they are old stories to scare children, but they very much real." Visenys now questioned, "Why does everyone think they are myths now?" Tauren sighed and answered, "Most of the history behind them were lost when the Andal invasion came and it didn't help, many didn't have records of it. So the White Walkers have faded into legend over the centuries. People only knew it by story, which slowly became to be considered as a children's story. The only ones who believed them to be real are the Starks became we have hand records from our ancestor Torek Stark." Aegon looked at Rhaenys and Visenya, both of the gave nod. So Aegon with small smile said, "It seems we have a lot to talk about then." 12 comments 0 vote. Dorne. I am going to take a huge break from this fanfic. Aegon made the pact with North and he was okay with all their demands because none of it was too much. The rules were simple, one of them were Aegon nor the future rulers could just take their land or order their men around as they desire. Aegon agreed, also seeing everything went smoothly. Aragorn decided to give Aegon an advice, "From what I understand you are going after Dorne after this." Aegon was confused, but nodded as Aragorn continued, "I would advise you to reign in the kingdoms you conquered now and then go after Dorne, since I am sure Dorne knows more about how you fight with dragons and has probably come up with a battle plan against you." Aegon studied Aragorn and asked, "Are you sure?" Aragorn nodded and replied, "Yes, both Gandalf and I used to be close to the Martells, but our relationship with the now Queen Meria is strained a lot. Meria is really crafty, also dragon while powerful is still only 3. The people of Dorne are really passionate, even if you capture them, they would rebel against you sooner or later, and if you appoint someone to run the place instead of Martells again a rebellion would start." Visenya took the advice to heart, while Aegon was doubtful. Rhaenys was curious, asked, "What did she do?" Aragorn waved it off. Meria was arrogant and she had a habit of talking behind everyone's back. Most of the time right in front of them too. She called Gandalf just an old man, who thinks he is wise and that Queen Nymeria made a mistake with him. She even made fun of the dwarves and elves. Aragorn recognized she was bitter about elves having immortality since she was around 80 years old, fat, blind, and almost bald. The lords mostly called her the Yellow Toad of Dorne. Also, Aragorn was sure if not for her son Nymor, who with his silver tongue makes sure to calm the angry lords, Queen Meria would have many troubles with many of her people. After reeling in the kingdoms he was now under his reign, Targaryens returned to Dorne with their dragons only taking a small part of their army to test the water. Just like they thought, the Dornish refused to meet the Targaryens in the field, instead resorting to guerrilla tactics. They learned from the Field of Fire and Harrenhal that there was no resisting the Targaryen dragons in open battle or by hiding in their castles. Therefore, fleeing when the dragons approached and then launched ambushes as soon as they flew away. But this was noticed by Visenya, who used Aragorn's gift of communication mirrors to tell Aegon and Rhaenys the location where the Dornish were running to hide. The 3 dragons coordinated the next attack, making the Dornish army not quick enough to retreat, Valerian unleashing his flames, and it wasn't long as Rhaenys and her dragon, Merryx's would fly overhead, still blowing flames in a line all the way across Dornish army, who would scream and fall and die in the inferno. So half of the army was burnt to death. The casualties Dornish had that time was huge. But this wasn't the end. Meria decided to take things further. She asked Ser Joffrey Dane to invade the Reach and led an army to Aldtown. Ser Joffrey marched an army from Starfall to Aldtown. Unable to breach the city's walls, Joffrey had the fields, farms, and villages burned for 20 leagues around the city. This angered by this, Aegon responded with Queen Visenya Targaryen and her dragon, Vhagar, burning Starfall to the ground. Nymor pleaded with his mother, "Mother, please, you know the Starks are going to ally with the Targaryens soon." But that went from one ear and through another. The conflict continued. Rhaenys and her dragon, Merryx's, almost died in one of the conflicts, where Merryx's was shot by a scorpion bolt, but being slightly more aware of such weapons from Aegon, who warned them. Aegon didn't care about Merya calling him petty. So Rhaenys was able to steer clear from them without any problems. Nymor after his mother's death would quickly try to make a truce with Aegon I, who remembered Aegon's advice and agreed to let Dorne remain independent at least for now, ending the wars of conquest. Aegon went back to the site of his army's first landing at the mouth of the Blackwater River and begins construction of a brand new capital city for his unified realm, King's Landing. He would then build the infamous Iron Throne forged by Beleriand from the swords of the people he defeated. Aegon I has 3 children. His elder son Aenys and a ripple in fate caused Rhaenys to have a daughter Lena with his sister wife Rhaenys, and his younger son Maegor with his sister wife Visenya. Lena would go on to marry the youngest son of Torrhen Stark, Eldrick Stark. 12 comments 0 vote. Chapter 32. Nymor is smart enough to try to appease the Starks and Targaryens first instead of Aegon, since he doesn't know what to give a person who is a king, immortal, rich, and is going to get married soon. But this was a very good plan, as the pact between Dorne and Targaryens was that until their alliance is solidified with marriage, Dorne will remain independent. Nymor even subtly hinted he wanted to give a betrothal contract for his future daughter or granddaughter to the Starks in the future. While thing was happening, Targaryens now had a very stable reign over Westeros, but now the issue came with Aegon's children. Maegor, while talented as his father with a sword, he showed signs of cruelty at a young age and didn't show any empathy to anyone except his mother and father. Aegon with time started showing signs of aging, the same can be said for his wives. But they kept a very healthy relationship with Starks, Aegon, and Gandalf. Now he was in King's Landing, the castle, looking at Aegon getting his backside treated. Aegon chuckled and said, "I told you a throne made of swords would not be a great idea, but you were the one who said it would be amazing." Aegon winced and replied, "Yes, I really thought it was a good idea at that time." Rhaenys and Visenya were amused by this, while Aegon smiled and said, "Valinor is open to people now, every 30 years some of the people can journey there." Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya hearing this was shocked and excited. After all, these 3 visited Middle-earth, and let's just say, their minds were blown, and they also heard stories about many things in Middle-earth. One of them was Valinor, the famous land of the Valar. It was said to be only people allowed by the Valar could sail there by the straight road. Visenya and Rhaenys wanted to see Valinor after hearing about it from Arwen. The girls got along quite well. Also, Aegon questioned, "When is this journey happening?" Aegon answered, "In a month, we are taking some of the common folk in North too. Also, the Starks are coming." Rhaenys hearing about Starks asked, "So Lena is also coming?" Aegon knew Lena was the apple of Aegon and Rhaenys' eyes. Aegon even confessed if not for his shaky ground with faith of 7, he would have made Lena his heir. Aegon smiled, gave the nod and replied, "Yes, she has been traveling through Middle-earth with Eldrick for some time now." Visenya with an envious look muttered, "I envy her a lot." Aegon knew Lena was happy, while Rhaenys asked, "What about Anduin?" Anduin Stark, son of Lena and Eldrick Stark, now studying swordsmanship under Finrod and would be considered the most talented swordsman in history. Aegon smiled and replied, "He joins his mother and father on their trips from time to time, so he is good too." Aegon and Rhaenys nodded, they wanted to meet their grandson again. As Aegon changed the subject, "How is Maegor and Aenys?" All 3 frowned now. Aegon sighed and said, "Aenys is the same kind-hearted and courteous boy. But he wants to be loved by everyone and always trying to please everyone." Rhaenys added, "He made friends easily, but he also trusted everyone and allowed himself to be easily influenced. He was a dreamer." Visenya with slight pride said, "Maegor was a born warrior whose skill with weapons was unmatched. He lived for war, tourneys, and battle, and rose to become one of the youngest and finest knights of his time." She paused with slight disappointment and sadness continued, "He was also a hard and brutal, sometimes taking things too far." Aegon nodded and said, "True, Maegor is quarrelsome, quick to take offense, slow to forgive, and fearsome in his wrath. He is rigid, unyielding, and unbending." Rhaenys sighed and said, "We already discussed this, we can't let Maegor have the crown, he is too bloodthirsty. I really wished it was not this way. But he scares me sometimes." This was change in rule of succession. Originally Thr oldest always takes the lordship or kingship. But because of suggestion from Gandalf the rule was changed and many were okay with it. So this obviously made Maegor believe he had a chance to be the king. But this was foreseen by Aegon, Visenya and Rhaenys. They didn't want Maegor to rule, since they could see the madness in him and chances of him becoming a tyrant was huge. Rhaenys looks at Visenya, who gave a sad smile. After all, which mother wants to hear that? While Aragon said, I know Maegor is highly loyal to his mother and respects his father, but that is all the emotional connections he has. Visenya looked at her hands in sadness and said, true, he doesn't have any true friends. Visenya for the past years has been trying to temper his need for aggression, but it was not working. She had seen the look he had given her when she was going against him. The survival of Rhaenys created a ripple, unlike the original timeline where Aegon and Visenya's relationship strained after her death, with Aegon mourning Rhaenys and the same with Visenya who became distant from everyone else. In the original timeline she was an avid supporter of her son's usurping to the throne and was unable to see his faults or recognize them. But here all three are mentally well and were able to recognize the signs. Visenya was saddened by how her son turned out. 12 comments 0 vote. Chapter 33. Aegon was not sure either of his sons would be good king, with one being easily influenced and the other is bloodthirsty and unbending. Aegon multiple times wanted to name his daughter the heir to the throne, but that is not really a great idea at the moment and he knew this daughter didn't want it for 2 reasons. Flashback. Lena, after hearing her father talk about giving her the throne, shook her head and said, that won't work. I mean, if this is Middle-earth or North it is possible. I mean, North has already had 2 queens before this and same can be said for Middle-earth, but the 6 kingdoms are a whole different matter. They won't allow this without some sort of miracle or fight happening. Aegon nodded. He knew Middle-earth would accept women as their queen, while North still had some reservations. But if the girl did prove herself, then the people of North would have no issues with it, but South is not the same. The first problem is Faith of the Seven has already viewed Aegon Targaryen's marriage to his sisters as tainted, and bringing Alina in as the queen would cause issues with them and the lords. Also, Maegor will be angry he was passed off by someone younger. Aegon no groaned and thought, why didn't I really follow Valar at that time? Aegon, Rhaenys and Visenya actually started praying to the Valar more than the Faith of the Seven. Flashback ended. Aragon worked out THR kinks in the flying ship and his first fully functional one was not the fastest, but it was a good working model and this was just the start. Aragon, Finrod and Legolas were now studying the magnificent white ship, which was hovering over the sea. Finrod and Legolas were still in awe at this new creation of Aragon. They had seen a carriage version for this. But this was just amazing. Finrod, breaking from his daze, questioned, are you going to unveil this during the journey to Valinor? Aragon nodded and answered, yes, this would make their first trip to Valinor the best memory of their lives. Both Finrod and Legolas nodded, while Legolas added, we have been increasing the number of security around Azelohar, just for protection purposes. Azelohar was a green mound of grass near the western gate of Valm. It is where the 2 trees of Valinor are standing. Aragon nodded, understanding Legolas' fear. After all, in his past memory the 2 trees were destroyed and he seems to not want this one to receive the same fate. While he was also thinking about the Valar different locations of Valinor, everyone will be warned of not disturbing them. Each of the Valar had their own region of the land where they resided and altered things to their desire. Yavanna, the Vala of nature, growth, and harvest, resided in the pastures of Yavanna in the south of the island. Orome, the Vala of the hunt, lived in the woods of Orome to the northeast of the pastures. The forest was home to many creatures which Orome could track and hunt. Nienna, the lonely Vala of sorrow and endurance, lived cut off in the far west of the island in the halls of Nienna, where she spent her days crying, looking out to sea. Just south of the halls of Nienna and to the north of the pastures there were the halls of Mandos. Mandos, the brother of Nienna, was the Vala of the afterlife. All inhabitants of Arda went to the halls of Mandos should they happen to die, mortals and immortals alike, although it was said that in death as in life, they were separated. Also living in the halls of Mandos was his spouse Ver the Weaver, who wove the threads of time. To the south were situated the gardens of Lorien, where dwelt Irmo, the Vala of dreams. And on an isle situated in the middle of the lake of Lorelin in Lorien, dwelt Irmo's wife Este. To the north of this were the mansions of all the smith Vala who was spoused to Yavanna. In the northeast lay the mansions of Manwë and Varda, the 2 most powerful Valar. They are the only ones Aragon hadn't seen face to face. Aegon's death and Maegor's tyranny draft. But with time Aegon started getting more and more weak and health was affected. So with his death the throne was passed to Aenys, who while foolish was still able to be guided by Rhaenys and Visenya. By that time Aenys had married Lady Alyssa Velaryon, had a daughter Rhaena. Then a boy named Aegon. But Maegor had married Cerys Hightower. For a while they still had no children. Magar then suddenly announced that Saris was barren and that he had taken another wife, Lady Ali's Haraway. Unable to convince the Septonate Dragonstone to perform the wedding, Magar and Ali's had been wed in a Valyrian wedding ceremony led by Dowager Queen Visenya Targaryen. This marriage angered many. Magar quarreled bitterly with his brother, King Aenys, while Saris's brother, Lord Martin Hightower, demanded that Magar set Ali's aside. The High Septon denounced the marriage as sin and fornication and called Ali's, this whore of Haraway. Many of the pious lords in the realm began to follow his example, openly referring to Ali's as Magar's whore. Magar remained defiant, however, citing that his father had taken 2 wives as well, claiming that the strictures of the faith did not rule the blood of the dragon. Feeling he had no other option, Aenys furiously gave Magar a choice: set Ali's aside or go into exile for 5 years. Magar chose the latter option and left for Pentos with Ali's and Balerion. He also took the sword Blackfire with him, refusing Aenys's request to leave the sword behind. Septon Myrmison replaced Magar as hand, while Aenys named his eldest son, Prince Aegon, Prince of Dragonstone. But this wasn't the end. King Aenys announced to the whole kingdom that his son was going to wed his daughter. This didn't go well with the Faith, who was given the word by Aegon that the incestuous marriage of the Targaryens would stop with him. While the Rhaenys and Visenya were not happy with announcement was planning to talk to the Faith about this being a mistake. Aragon was visited by Visenya and Rhaenys. Both looked really tired as Aragon asked, "I heard Aenys' announcement about marriage of Aegon and Rhaena. If remember correctly, Aegon wanted this tradition to die down with him." Visenya nodded and replied, "He announced without consulting anyone and our grandchildren just followed his lead." Aragon nodded and asked, "Are you going to talk to Faith about this?" Rhaenys replied, "We are planning to." But the Faith militant launched an attack. While they fought back and Aenys was more of charmer than warrior, was scared to death. But with North coming to help, Faith militant was pushed back, but during this time Aenys died of a heart attack because weak and sickly body gave out from the pressure. Magar, who heard about this, announced he was now the new king of Westeros. This was considered usurping Aegon, who was Aenys' son. But end of the day, Aegon was too young and naive to contest for the throne. North heard this, now wanted nothing to do with this war for the crown, while they helped with fighting the Faith militant. Magar, who still warred with the Faith until he completely burned Sept of Remembrance. Rhaenys and Visenya controlled much of Magar's bloodthirsty impulses. But sometimes it couldn't be held and they learned to keep him occupied by building Red Keep. Aragon really wanted to intervene. But Galadriel had told him not to, as this was fixed event. Which mean even if stopped Magar or even killed him, someone else would just replace him to the tyrant from the original timeline. Chances are either Prince Viserys Targaryen, who was the second son of King Aenys the First Targaryen, and Queen Alyssa Velaryon. Since Prince Aegon died in attack by a Rouge Faith militant. They even talked and made Magar bring Aenys' widow, Dowager Queen Alyssa Velaryon, and her youngest 2 children, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, his mother's wards on Dragonstone, while summoning her son Viserys to court, making him his personal squire. Still without an heir of his own body, Magar visited one of his 5 wives every night. But nothing worked, or his thing didn't work. 15 comments 0 vote.